The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello.
Hi, Betty.
Hi.
Just a second.
Okay. I don't see the camera icon you said I needed to push.
Yep, just a second. I'm going to get that sorted. I'll be right back. Okay, hello there. Welcome to today's webinar. We're welcoming attendees here by the minute. So as people get situated, we'd like to thank everybody for attending today. My name is Jeff Saki with the marketing department at LSI, and I just have a few quick items for housekeeping, and then I'm going to pass it over to the presenters. So the audio lines will be muted, but please submit your questions and comments using the question pane located on the GoToWebinar panel. It's very simple to use. Just type in your questions and we'll have staff on hand to help moderate them and direct them to the panel as the presentation goes along. And we'll have Q&A time at the end to answer those questions. We'll also be recording today's session, so please be sure to refer to that after, or if you had some colleagues unable to attend today, you can pass along the recorded link. So with that, I am going to start recording and hand it over to LSI CEO, and we'll get started. And Michael, the floor is now yours, and we'll welcome the panel and get started.
All right. Want to thank everybody for joining us. Just before we get started, look for that chat box and please type and let us know that you can hear us. If you can do that, that would be great. I just want to make sure our audio is good. Let me see here. Pull out my chat box. Look. Okay, great. Again, I want to make sure everybody can hear. Jeff, we might have an audio issue. Only Willette is hearing us right now. Only presenters. So, did you start the broadcast? We're good? Okay. Eric told me that we are good, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone. Before we get started on today's presentation, let me go ahead and share my screen. I want to make sure that my screen is visible to everyone. Again, just let me know if you can see our slides. Here, we'll go ahead and get started then. Great. So with me is Betty Kennedy and Willette Houston. We're going to be talking about the case study of Bear Creek Elementary, which is an amazing story of going from a D to an A in about a year and a half of working in our Schools for Rigor initiative. So before we open up that panel discussion and talk about that, in fact, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves now? Betty, can we start with you?
Sure. And technical question, do I need to click the camera, Jeff, or can you see me?
I think you need to click.
If you'd like to, Betty.
There I am.
It's quite all right.
I'm there.
Yes. Click it as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Betty Kennedy. I've been working with LSI for quite some time now, having the pleasure of doing primarily leadership coaching with schools and some staff developing. And I've had the honor of working with the principal of Bear Creek and Bear Creek Elementary in Pinellas County the last couple of years. And so, Ms. Houston, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Willette Houston. I'm the proud principal of Bear Creek Elementary. I've been here this is my 6th year. My first 4 years, I was the AP. Last year was my first year as principal, and this is my 2nd year as principal.
Awesome. So I'm going to just do a little bit of frame up here regarding some of the couple slides, just so everybody knows what a School for Rigor is and what the process is. So Learning Sciences, I'm actually talking to you from our Applied Research Center in Florida. We do a number of things, have state contracts, but the thing that we like the most is working directly with schools, doing implementation projects, Schools for Rigor, like we're talking about. We're also Wallace Foundation partners, Gates Foundation partners, and run our national conference, which we'll talk a little bit about building expertise in a few minutes. The Schools for Rigor, it's an intensive supports to transform core instruction and leadership. This is just our 15 schools in Florida that have been in this, and what you can see, Willette's school is highlighted here. All schools in the Schools for Rigor implementation increase student achievement in their first year. 70% of those schools enough to raise a full letter grade or more in 1 year. And that's just an absolutely amazing, considering this is not a program. It is not a intervention for kids or something like that. It is a focus on building leadership capacity and core instructional capacity rapidly, which we're going to talk about in some detail with Willette. So part of what we see in this intensive supports is tiered supports, leadership coaching for the principal. This is absolutely critical, and Betty and Willette have been engaged in that as the coach and as the principal, and they'll be able to talk to us about this as we go through. Instructional coaching for school-based coaches and teachers. We call them coaching for instruction days that mirror our professional development. So I'm sure you know the research on this, but professional development has very little, 5% or less implementation, unless it's paired with coaching. And we would argue that needs to be paired with principal support into the implementation. And when that happens, the schools can move fairly rapidly. So we add into this predictive metrics, a rigor walk process, standards tracker. I'll also ask Willette to talk about these processes. Rigor walk is a process that we do with our leadership coaches. Betty Kennedy is an example, where we can walk a school using scientific markers, and in those markers we can get a baseline for the school, and as instruction begins to move and those markers go up, the rigor walk scores go up, it is correlated to state test scores for children also going up. And it just confirms the research that there's a causal relationship between core instruction and student achievement, and when we can get that core instruction more rigorous and more student-centered quickly, it raises and produces results on learning gains on student achievement. Talking about the transparent and accountable metrics, very quickly, we typically start with this process where we examine and measure and analyze state assessment trends for the building, conduct a rigor walk and needs analysis to form a baseline. Then what we have are implementation designed with these data cycles, the professional development, leadership coaching, and teacher coaching. And then very important, we remeasure. We then do our rigor walks. We see if those scientific indicators are moving. We do root cause analysis. This informs our coaching that's done in the building. Make adjustments if necessary, and we go through the cycle again with coaching, professional development, and so forth. So even though it's a scientific treatment, what we call an implementation to move a school, it's tailored to the needs of the school because every school is unique. And this process repeats quarterly throughout the year. It builds capacities quickly in leaders and in teachers and in professional learning communities. And it moves the student achievement trajectory of the school, and you can see our results. Those results have been replicated across the country. We have double-digit gains in schools from Iowa to Indiana and in Georgia. In fact, one school in Georgia, Carver High School in Muskogee, just reported 1 year of implementation, they gained an entire letter grade. And also, before we forget, if you want to hear more about this, you'll be able to see these folks. We'll be talking from our Schools for Rigor. We'll be at the national conference. that you can see here. It'll be happening in June 13th through 15th, and we encourage everyone that would like to attend. And so now let's go back and really kind of talk about this. So if you don't mind me kind of opening it up, Willette, do you mind talking to us a little bit what Bear Creek, what this transformation process was like, what it was the before state and now the after state of having achieved the A?
In the initial phase of the Rigor implementation project, Bear Creek was a school, I remember when I first started here, where the conditions for learning was in place. You know, you had processes, procedures. It was a safe learning environment. And many times, oftentimes, those are the reasons why schools have a hard time moving forward. So basically, that was not the reason why we were not moving forward. It was basically looking at our building and really, you know, getting to the root of what's going on with core instruction. I mean, we can pile on, you know, multiple layers of tiered supports, but if we're not strengthening our core, you're not going to see the gains that Bear Creek was able to make. And I like to say 14 months. So I mean, because it wasn't 2 years. People like to say 2 years. I'm oftentimes reminding them that no, this journey started in February. We had testing that first year, and then we were in summer break. And so last year was the first full year of implementation. We had a staff here that was willing. My teachers, the majority of them, they were willing to do whatever was necessary. We worked so hard, but it just felt like we weren't moving in the right direction. We had all the potential, yet we were not moving the needle here. After, you know, the first couple of months of the Rigor implementation project, we really started to look at things from a different lens, really focusing on standards-based instruction. It's so, you know, oftentimes we want to do all kinds of things. We hear about all sorts of programs, but if one of the things that I've learned is that if it's not standards-based, basically there's no room for it. We're all competing for time within the day. Time is so limited. That's the one thing that we don't have enough of is time. So there's no room to waste time on things that aren't going to align to student achievement. So that was kind of where we were when I first started.
And I remember Betty and I walking the school before this started in February. Betty, you remember your reflections, and can you add to it?
Very similar to what Willette said, and I think what she said is right on. It's the core instruction, and that we found that to make a difference, every minute of every day, all day, has to be tied to a standard. So through coaching, Willette and her team have learned to not just look at a classroom as being orderly or a happy place to be, but to critically look at instruction and look at it from the standards-based approach, everything the students are doing. And also, when we first walked through, we found that it was a lot about what the teacher was doing. There was a lot of teacher action, a lot of teacher talk, of great teachers there. And we've now learned that what's more important is what are the students doing. And so Willette and her team have become very proficient at that, of looking at what the students are doing to see if what the students are doing is at the right level of the standard, not necessarily the talk of the teacher. So I think those two big things, the standard-based core instruction every minute, all day, like she said, they did have their tier 1, tier 2 supports in place, and also focusing on making sure the students are doing the work at the right level of the standard, not about the teacher talking about it.
But Betty, one of the things that we find often when we walk schools is that knowledge sounds like common knowledge, but it's not so easy to actually implement in a school across classrooms. And I remember when we walked the first time, we were looking at a lot of low rigor instruction. I mean, well-intended and caring teachers. That was very obvious to us. But the school's not that way now. Can you kind of step us through from that first Rigor walk that you did, what the coaching model looks like?
Well, the first rigor walk, like I said, it was evident that most of the instruction was really not tied specifically to the broken down standards, and we break them down into targets so that we're really focusing on the instruction of where it should be. But where we've taken it, and Willette, feel free to add on to this, where we've taken it is really teacher understanding of that target. The staff through training, as you showed the cycle on the slides, they had professional development and then follow up. So it's not just a professional development day, follow up with making sure what's in the professional development day is implemented. And that, I think, is what really makes the difference. And in that follow up, the teachers were led by Ms. Houston and her team into understanding the standard, number one. It became evident they didn't truly understand it, so they broke it down. And I remember her sharing some videos with me of her teachers breaking it down and demonstrating amongst themselves what would a lesson look like that matched the standard. So the very first step we took was making sure that all instruction was aligned to the target. And I will say Bear Creek is 100% there. Would you say, Ms. Houston?
Yes, I would.
That was the hardest nut to crack, but they're 100%
really
there.
Yes, it was a challenge for me as well. Just really, just looking back, in retrospect, just really understanding truly that this is your standard. You don't get to make up activities that you're trying to force to align to the standard. So I think we spent probably our first maybe the first 6 months even really just focusing on that. And then the power of giving feedback on that specific thing. I think oftentimes we forget that what we're asking teachers to do, we're not giving them the feedback that's necessary to grow their practice as it relates to what it is that you're focusing on. And for us, it was in regards to, this was just one of the things that we focused on.
And in fact, I will say, I think the power behind this is we don't walk through a school and say, here's 100 things you need to get better at, because teachers can't get better at 100 things. And we looked at what was most important to move that student achievement. And we talked about our 3 rocks. Can you remember what they are, Willette? Would you like to share what the 3 big rocks were that we just, that's where you focused your feedback?
Standards-based target task alignment, monitoring for cognitive engagement, and organizing students for learning.
Yes, and the monitoring really was to take action, to make sure when we're monitoring and then organizing students. That sounds like, well, that's only 3 things, but those 3 things can move a school. Absolutely. And I want to praise Willette and her team, because what moved the school, we as LSI give that coaching feedback. That's what we're there for. We walk together. It's not that we're telling them what to do. We're collaborative partners, but we see what needs to happen together. But then what moved the school was Willette and her team began giving feedback every week to every teacher on those 3 things. I think it's the focus. It's the outside person looking in to help. We maintain our collaboration. Even when I'm not physically there, we talk about some things. You might want to share that too. And then we are strategic. So there's always some work to do. This is something that you can't master until you get 100% of the students on, proficient.
Absolutely. And as soon as you feel like you're there, there's something else that needs to be that you need to give your teachers feedback on. Just in addition to walking with Betty, aside from the rigor walks, I always appreciated the time when she came out just to meet with myself and my assistant principal, and just really coached us. It was a growth. It was a growth process for me, because I was like, we're doing this, but we really weren't. So it really helped me to focus my lens. I remember our last rigor walk last year, and just to see, it was in May, and I believe it was the week before the end of the school year, because we expect teachers to teach all year long. And I was just, literally goosebumps from seeing the growth that my staff had made. Didn't have any data at that time. We didn't know if we were going to move from a C school to a B school, but if, based on what we saw, we absolutely saw students doing the work. We saw students doing the heavy lifting. It was standards based, and that's all you can ask for. And just to see where we came, I mean, we were shocked by the A. I'm going to be honest. I was shocked by the A, from a C to an A this particular school year. But I do believe that just having that collaboration, that always being pushed. I mean, Betty, I thank you for that. Just constantly having someone to speak with, even when she wasn't on campus. We always had, at the beginning, we had bi-weekly phone calls, and she would check. We had a Rigor, we had an action board, and on that action board, she expected me to do what we said we were going to do. If we were training our staff on something, she expected us to report out on that. And so I think the accountability also was huge for me, because it's so oftentimes you go to a professional development, you go get training, and it's so easy to say, hey, we're going to implement this, but we don't even have a plan of how we're going to do that. And that was one of the things that was really afforded with the LSI Rigor implementation project, is that we were expected to, on those our three rocks, based on our 3 rocks, we developed action steps, and each action step was to get us closer to becoming that more a rigorous, a school of rigor. So I really appreciated the accountability. She was my accountability partner. But my staff and I, my leadership team, we constantly engaged in dialogue about how are we going to present this to the staff, and how are we going to monitor and inspect what we expect. And so I think that was huge.
And I think what Willette's speaking to, Michael, is the cycle that you showed on one of the slides. There's a cycle of support, 3 cycles of support. The professional development, the staff developer who does the professional development comes back and walks classrooms with the coaches to help them coach, to make sure there's implementation. The leadership coach does the rigor walk, but comes back to walk through with the principal, the assistant principal, to make sure they know what they're looking for. I believe that's the power there, is the built-in cycles of support, not just professional development. And we are accountability partners, and I think that's part of what the joint accountability is with this project, with LSI being as accountable as the school, and together we all want the same thing.
Absolutely.
Right. And then every 30 days, there's a meeting, an executive action team meeting with central office. So it's completely transparent, showing what our leading indicators are and are they moving in the right directions around core instruction. Well, can you speak a little bit about what the tiered support meant for your faculty as they're going through it? And I'm sure there's lots of folks on our audience of like, well, how did your teachers react to this? Did you get pushback? What was that process?
It seems like it was so long ago. I think it would be naive for me to say no. We never received any feedback, but I think they were so eager to figure this out. We wanted to figure it out. We have been working so hard. And I won't say at the wrong things, but the things that we were working on did not move us. The tier supports, the teachers built a great relationship with our staff developer. And so they knew that they could call on her at any time as well if they needed clarification regarding something. But, I had a schedule. I knew our coaching for implementation days, which were intense, and a deepening of our professional development days based on what training we were going to receive. And I just think my staff was on board from the beginning. And one of the things that I want to say to anyone is that you have to build the relationships with your staff in order for them, because my staff will do anything that I need them to do, and that's just the bottom line. You do have some people who are not they kind of drag their feet a little bit. They take their time there, but when you're seeing everyone doing this work, you have a tendency to want to get on board. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing at Bear Creek. So everyone, sometimes at their own pace, with where they are and they're feeling comfortable, for the most part, we all were working for the same thing. We all wanted this.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an important part of how we work with a coalition of the willing, and then help empower a broad-based action in the school. And that way the culture changes in a very positive way.
Right.
And we're not dealing with a lot of resistors up front in that process. In fact, I think oftentimes it's done the opposite, that principals spend a great deal of time with their most resistant faculty, and we kind of starve the folks that would grow and become models for others to implement. So this is kind of the reverse, but it's actually following second order change research as part of this process.
And I think it's normal for teachers or schools to have slumps along the way when they get tired. And I think you've noticed that, Willette, here and there.
Oh, yeah.
But she keeps going forward. She says, I know it's hard. I know it's tiring. I know you're tired. I'm here to help you, but we're going to keep doing this.
And celebrating the success as well, you know, like in my weekly newsletter, they're very competitive. Educators are competitive. So if you make it into a competition, they're all about doing it. So just highlighting the people who are on board, you know, giving a kudos to the grade level team that has implemented whatever. Went through our walkthroughs this week, we saw standards-based target task alignment in all of the third grade class. You just make it a big deal. I'm a cheerleader at heart, so I'm always celebrating and always full of energy. So this is what we do, but they like it.
So part of the requirement of being standards-based is moving from traditional direct instruction and independent practice to student-centered instruction. So the students are the ones doing the work, producing evidences and so forth. In Title I schools, we will sometimes find that people are a little afraid to do that because they're afraid of losing control of the classroom. And we're saying the exact opposite happens. Engagement goes up, negative behaviors go down. Can you talk about that journey towards student-centered and getting your teachers to let go of it?
It was just given, I'm going to say it again, given the feedback. One of the things that we've started to do here is, and as a matter of fact, tomorrow we're going to go around. This is our second time this year, is instructional rounds, where as a grade level team. So often one of the things that I had heard was with the feedback, you know, in the beginning, you know, people really weren't as open. We didn't have that growth mindset. So we had to do some work with that as well, because it is kind of hard when people are telling you, hey, we didn't see this. This is what we need to see. But we started the instructional rounds, I think, helped. We do what's called instructional rounds, where I will organize a day where grade level teams, every grade level team during their block time is attached to another grade level, and they go into the classrooms and they look for components of what it is that we're looking for at this time, what the leadership team is giving feedback on. So tomorrow we're going to be doing that work. We're going to be looking specifically at target task alignment with success criteria. And we've gotten a little bit of pushback with the success criteria because, you know, teachers are looking at a standard, they've unpacked that standard, and then you have your targets. But the success criteria for any subject area is, how do students know where they are? In addition to using the tool, another tool that we have, which is called the LSI tracker. How do we get students to own their own learning? Teachers acting as facilitators. We're still working on this particular element. So it's just basically getting them engaged. I think to have them get in the classrooms is more powerful than any time that I can give them feedback. And one of the things that I would love to see is my staff just doing it without administration having to organize it. We're not there yet, but I want my fourth grade teachers to go to my third grade team and say, hey, let's get together and we're going to walk through your grade level during math block. And today we want to see student center. We're going to be looking for evidence of of student-centered work with rigor. We're going to, and developing their own criteria of what it is that they're looking for. We're looking for students organized for learning and having those conversations that are going to move classrooms forward and student thinking forward. So that's just one of the things one of the things that we're trying to do here. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that is one of the ways.
And I think just to add to that, Michael, last year they worked on organizing students and working, releasing to students, because it was very teacher-centered there. And just releasing to students in terms of letting them do the work. This year, our big focus is really moving towards their ownership of that work. They're still a little teacher-guided in their grouping in some places, but so I think what you're saying is in your instructional rounds, you're focusing for teachers to look for that true student ownership within the grouping.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about Standards Tracker and what it does, and what effects you've seen in your school with teachers that are using it?
So last year well, the year before was the first year of being introduced to the standards-based tracker. But what it is it's a tool, it's a database that has all of the Florida standards, which are aligned to the Common Core standards, where teachers can go in, and in third grade they say, hey, in math, I'm going to teach whatever, I can't think of a standard right now off the top of my head, but any standard. And in this tracker, they have developed a way of work where teachers can move along the progression to get to rigor, where the targets are in there based on that progression. So teachers will go and they will set up their standard. They have all of their students in there, but when it comes to walking around and listening to conversations to truly see if students are engaged in understanding and mastering the targets, which are going to eventually lead to them mastering the standard, they're able to collect that data on the spot. And so teachers are able to select either green, the kid has it, student has it, yellow, they're in progress, or red, they're not there. And so it's a formative assessment tool without even developing another tool. And then you're able to day to day go in and say, I need to reteach this to this group of students, or in my lesson, I need to make sure that I'm monitoring or I'm reteaching and coaching students up to make sure that they understand the misconception of not mastering a specific target. So we were kind of slow. This year, we're kind of slow still getting the target. I'm going to be honest with the LSI tracker, but what I do is I give feedback. Once I start giving the feedback on the usage of the tracker, and in my Houston's Hustle, my weekly newsletter, I just give them like a temperature check of where we are. Fourth grade is at 100% usage, fifth grade. And then last year, what we did was the district aligned the schools who were using this tracker. They aligned, the district's teaching and learning department aligned our cycle assessments. We had in the district, we used common assessments last year. So they aligned those to specific targets within standards that we were going to assess students on. And it was quite enlightening to see, which classrooms where teachers tracked and gave feedback on a specific target to see whether or not that students actually mastered that target when it was time to take the common assessment. So it is the tool that's used for planning, for standards-based planning, because you have the data at your hands. It's not about grading papers. You have data, you have, feedback available day to day that you can use to inform your instruction.
Great. Some of the questions are coming in. I'm going to ask you some of them. So one is, how many students and staff do you have at Bear Creek?
Bear Creek has just under 400 students. This year we're at about 385, and I have a total of 19 teachers K through 5, and in pre-K we have 3 additional teachers.
And can you talk about the demographics a little bit?
We're a Title I school. Primarily, we're right now at about 46% African American. We have about 38% Caucasian, and then other. very 100% free and reduced lunch population. ESC is about 23% of our population. We have about 23% ESC students.
And I might add, a relatively small school means that every student's achievement counts in terms of the Florida accountability grade. 1 or 2 students can make the grade go down. So they were very focused on every student to get that school up to the A.
And some of the questions are asking, how did you give feedback? Was it verbal, online? Did you write it down to your teachers?
So we also use eye observation, which is used for our formal and informal, which is required, for teacher evaluation. But the feedback that we're speaking of right now is we would give it in. Teachers knew at the beginning of the week what our focus is going to. They always know what the focus is going to be. So this is going to help them with their planning. They know when we're coming around. We're looking for evidences of whatever it is that is stated in the weekly newsletter, and then it's my coach. This year I'm without an ELA coach, but my math coach, my assistant principal, and myself, we are assigned. I create a schedule, and each week we're assigned to it's a rotating schedule, so we're each assigned to different staff members. And based on what we're looking for, and it may be 2 components that we're looking for, we give the feedback in the form of a commendation and a recommendation. This is what we notice. We're looking for evidences of students' use of success criteria, and we either say that we saw it or it was not evident, and then we give them accommodation of how to implement that in their classrooms.
And what I like is they don't call it a feedback form, they call it a feed forward form, because it's feedback towards growth.
That's very nice. Another question is, what kind of gains did you see in your ESC population or English ELL population?
We do not have enough ELL students, but in ESC, which many of those students were in our L25, a large majority of our students, even in the ESC population, made data. If you look at, I'm not sure if attached to this document, you can see the L25 data, the breakdown of our data here in the state of Florida. There are 7 cells. So for grades 3, 4, and 5 that are included in our school grade, you have data for ELA, which is English Language Arts, Reading and Writing, Mathematics and Science. The science is for 5th grade, but then you also have, there is a cell for our L25 students, the lowest performing students in ELA, as well as mathematics, and then it's the overall learning gains. And I'm just going to say we were proud to outperform the district in every cell with our learning gains and our growth. One of the things that I will say is, so oftentimes as a Title I school, if there's anyone out there that's listening that's a Title I school, we focus on reading because we feel as though students have to master reading before they can be great mathematicians or science. And what I've learned is that's not true. When you look at a school such as Bear Creek, where 47% of the students, which we had double-digit gains in ELA, 47% are reading at a level of proficiency. But then you look at our mathematics and our science, and it's just amazing to see what our kids of poverty, can do. And just not limiting them to less focus on reading, because if they can't read, they can't do mathematics. I think that was also another area. But good teaching is good teaching, using sound standards-based strategies and teaching to the core is what moved us forward.
And what Willette was referring to is there's a case study document in your handout on your GoToWebinar toolbar, and that you can take a look at. If you're having trouble downloading that, just shoot us an email. We'll be happy to send the link to you. I think we're getting close to our wrap-up time. First of all, Willette, you've been, and Betty both have been an inspiration to us all. Love the work. So many times when we go in to schools to do rigor walks, we find they're upside down on interventions, more students in interventions than than should be, and really it's just a way of trying to remediate core instruction that isn't as strong as it could be. And the strengthening core instruction is really the thing that benefits students the most. And what we have seen time and time again, and we also see it with your school, teachers are happier at the end of it. Much happier at the end of this. It is hard. We ask a lot of learning through the process, change of habits, but we see the culture transform and the joy of teaching coming back. Do you mind showing your perspective on that?
Me or Betty? Me?
Willette, go ahead.
I'm going to tell you, I know my staff is this year, because we've worked so hard for so long. And like I said earlier, I don't want to say we were working hard at the wrong things, but so often in Title I schools, we have a tendency to concentrate on our Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids. Those things are important, but when your core is tight and you are really focusing on sound instruction and kids are getting it, and we look at our success and our growth, I mean, it's not all about school grades, but then it is about school grades. Because that is what everyone in the state of Florida, in this county, despite what we think, that's what people are looking at to determine, what a school, how is a school performing. I know it's not everything, but it is a strong indication of what's going on. And what has happened here is we have staff members here where staff members are actually bringing their students to our school. I mean, when you think about it, who wants to take and I think we had great things going on when we were a D school, but the staff members are bringing their students here. Other educators are sending their students to Bear Creek. And we are not a magnet. We're not a charter. We are not a fundamental school. Sometimes those are the schools where people want, especially educators, they want their students to be in the best of the best schools, quite naturally so. And I feel like this is Bear Creek. We are changing the narrative here, and this is what we're doing. It has been a positive impact. I mean, when you have retired educators in the community. I mean, the first day of school, I had a retired teacher come up, and she came to the front office, and she says, "I just want to see what an A school looks like." The community is taking pride. Our business partners are really embracing us. They are behind us. I'm not going to say they weren't behind us before, but now I know without a doubt they are proud as well. So it's not just Bear Creek that's owning this A, it is the community. And when you have parents that are being gatekeepers and they're using dialogue such as "this isn't the Bear Creek way," or students saying "this isn't the Bear Creek way because this is how we do things here," it's a sense of just pride, and people are happy to be here. And yes, the work is hard, but at the end of the day, it took this hard work to get us where we are now.
And I will give after 14 months, as you like to say, perspective, that when you walk on the campus, these students now are so engaged and ready to learn. And when you walk into a classroom and you don't hear the teacher talking, but you hear all the students talking with academic language and, arguing at a table, not about a fight or an argument, but about academia. It's just amazing. And that wasn't there 14 months ago. Would you agree? And when you see that now, it's very inspiring.
It is.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your story. Again, it's inspirational and also, I think, really needed. Schools need models. That's what we always talk about when we're working with districts to start a Schools for Rigor. Really is becoming, we call demonstration school, to show what's possible and then to create a model that can be replicated. And we have a saying that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it just, then other principals want to implement it, and it just grows. The same way it works with teachers, that the Coalition of the Willing really moves to everybody. being involved, it also does the same thing with schools. So again, thank you so much for putting the effort in, doing the learning. It's hard work, but boy, when you come out the other side, it's worth it.
It was worth it.
And I will say from the LSI perspective, our work is good, but it takes a willing partner like this principal to make it happen. You know, it really is a partnership.
So thank you, Willette. Please take our gratitude to the rest of your staff and the school
sure will.
as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Again, the presentation is being recorded, so we'll have this for you afterwards. Stay tuned for follow-ups, and we'll make sure to get you the information. And if you'd like to know more, simply, feel free to reach out. And again, just big thanks to everybody who joined us today, and a special thanks to Willette and Betty and Michael for the great presentation. And we wish you all the best success in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.